You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. This is Making Tracks. Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
It's not true. That's impossible.
Welcome back to Making Tracks Reaction Chats. I'm your co-host Mark Newbold, and this is our look at Chapter 20, The Foundling. So last week we opened with Din Djarin and Bo-Katan Kryze standing by the steps leading down to the living waters of the mines of Mandalore. As Din claimed he'd been redeemed, Bo claims she saw nothing in the waters, but as they leave they're chased by TIE interceptors, keeping them busy while Kryze's castle is destroyed by TIE bombers. They jump to hyperspace as we cut to Coruscant, where former Imperial scientist Dr. Pershing is giving a speech about his work. He's now part of the New Republic's amnesty program, but he's frustrated at losing so much valuable knowledge and is keen to, illegally, continue his work. Boarding a hover train bound for the shipyards with Moff Gideon's former communications officer Elia Kane, he gets the equipment he needs aboard Gideon's light cruiser, but is captured by New Republic soldiers and is soon seen restrained on a table by a Mon Calamari technician who tells him the device they're using to alter his mind is a 602 mitigator, but probably it's a mind flayer. Kane watches the procedure, turning up the dial as Pershing writhes in pain. Meanwhile, Kryze and Djarin exit hyperspace and return to the Mandalorians, where they're greeted by Paz Vizsla, who obstructs them. Kryze testifies that she was present when Din entered the living waters, which leads to the armourer emptying the vial of water that Din collected into a container, confirming that Djarin is indeed telling the truth. He's now redeemed, as is Bo-Katan, who has yet to remove her helmet. This is the way as we dive into Chapter 20, The Foundling. So once again I'm flying solo. Mark is wrapped up and busy with pre-Star Wars Celebration Europe stuff, so it'll be me once again taking us through Chapter 20, The Foundling. Lots to discuss. So let's start at the start. So basically, we kick off on the unnamed planet watching Mandalorians training. They're firing weapons over the water. They're doing hand-to-hand combat. There's judges refereeing fights. What you'd expect from Mandalorians. Training, honing their skills. Grogu's watching what look like stones. They turn out to be these weird little stone crab things that we saw on a pre-production image that was released quite a few weeks ago now. Din comes across, picks him up, tells him playtime's over, kid, come on, you've got to learn how to be a Mandalorian with the other foundlings. Puts him into a little training scenario where he has to basically play paintball, and after being hit by 2 shots, he finally uses the Force. After Dad tells him to loosen up, give it all he's got, use the skills that he has, which he does. He uses the Force to leap above the kid, then leap back, then fires 3 shots, which seems pretty unfair, seeing as the other kid was firing 1 at a time, and wins the fight. Good little scene, shows us what Grogu can do, shows us what these kids go through as well to train, to be Mandalorian warriors as they work up and gain seniority within the ranks of the Mandalorians. But as Ragnar, the kid, walks away, he gets picked up by basically, I think they call it a raptor. Essentially, it's just a huge dragon that grabs him and flies away. The Mandalorians chase with their jetpacks, but most of them run out of fuel. Thankfully, Bo-Katan and follows it as far as she safely can, realises that it's been taken to a lair, which they've tried to find but have never been able to do. But they don't want the creature to be spooked by hearing the jetpacks and hearing them coming. So Bo-Katan says maybe the best way to do this is to climb the wall using grappling hooks and their own skills, which they're all trained to do anyway. So the plan is set. Now this was cool. I thought this was really cool because Bo-Katan was obviously raised in a different way to all of the Mandalorians that we see here. They all have slightly different training. I would say similar skill sets, but they all honour Mandalore as a location. So when she's discussing training on mountains when she was basic training, it's no surprise to them. It's something that they're familiar with. Bo is becoming accepted by this covert, obviously led by the armourer. So speaking of the armourer, she leads Grogu into the forge, explains the history and the importance of the Mandalorian forge. presses controls are basically slamming this metal plate that we later learn she's making something for Grogu, but in the moment the sound of the smashing forge against the metal is triggering a bit of a flashback for Grogu. It's the most serious I think we've ever seen him look. I mean, he looks more like Yoda in this moment than he's ever looked, and all of a sudden we're 20 years plus in the past to the siege of the Jedi Temple, the Order 66 moment where the 501st have gone in and are slaying and taking down anyone and everyone in their way, led at first by Anakin, who's at this point we would assume is probably now left and he's on his way to Mustafar, if not already there. And we see from Grogu's point of view what's happening. They're trying to protect him. He's in his classic pram. He's being shot at by clone troopers, but protected by Jedi. And they get him into basically an elevator. And then as the doors open, you hear the word Kelleran. It's Kelleran Beck. It's Ahmed Best from Jedi Temple Challenge, the character that he played in there. So very cool scene. And all of a sudden we're racing through Coruscant on a speeder as he tries to get them to the Naboo. It's the same ship as Queen Amidala has, but again, if you think logically, that has probably now left Coruscant. So you could suppose that maybe this is Jar Jar Binks' ship, which would be kind of cool, given that it's Ahmed Best. And wow, can you imagine if we saw Jar Jar again? Have some cool moments in that era. But basically, Kelleran gets Grogu aboard the ship. They leave and leap hyperspace.
Hello, I'm Ahmed Best, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
The armourer gives Grogu his chest plate. It's called a rondel, so it has the Mudhorn on it, because obviously he and Din Djarin are of Clan Mudhorn, the clan of two. Fixes it to his chainmail. But meanwhile, the mission has gone as far as they really can now without disturbing or potentially disturbing the raptor. So they decide to camp for the night under the rocky formation, which will hide them from the creature, hopefully. And we see a very interesting scene where now we know, because Bo and Din have been in the living waters, and Din will now honour his pledge, and Bo is kind of playing along because she's in this company. She's sort of reading the room, if you like. She asks, well, how do we eat? And Mando says, well, we take our food and we all go to separate places. As Bo was leading the war party, essentially, she has the privilege of sitting next to the fire. Paz Vizsla explains that to her. Cool little moment, more culture. It's very similar to Book of Boba Fett when we learn a lot of the Tusken culture of that particular clan, and you realise there are slightly different cultures with different Tusken tribes, and it's the same with the Mandalorians. Each of these belief systems just have a slight tweak and a twist to how they are. We saw Boba Fett just taking his helmet off constantly in Book of Boba Fett, eating, talking to other members of criminal organisations. That's not the case here. So it was very interesting to see that. But the next morning, first light, they go to the rock face and start using their grappling hook to climb the nest. And when they get to the top, it's a good little scene, actually. It did remind me a bit of the Clone Wars animated movie, as the Republic vehicles are sort of rappelling up the cliff. But when they get to the top, Din uses his heat vision and he sees a signature, and Paz leaps in. Bo-Katan is annoyed because he should have waited until they cleared it. And all of a sudden we realise that there's 3 raptor chicks. And they do very much look like giant, tiny birds. Enormous eyes barely covered by eyelids. No real wings to speak of. Hungry, constantly hungry, and they've got a very unique mouth as well. So they start sort of attacking, and then all of a sudden the mama bird turns up, grabs Vizsla. After regurgitating the kid, Ragnar, the raptor picks up Vizsla in his mouth. Of course, he's got lots of armour on, so it's trying to chomp down on him, but it's not having much joy. Ragnar's in his hands, and the Mandos all fly after using their ropes, and basically preoccupied by not wanting to drop the food in its hand, not wanting to drop the food in its mouth. But at some point, the kid gets dropped, and Bo-Katan catches the kid. Vizsla gets off and lands on a rock. The creature is all falls into the water, basically in a very Jurassic World moment, eaten by the big turtle dinosaur thing that we saw a few episodes ago when you first went to this as yet unnamed, and I hope they name it soon, as yet unnamed planet.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
For Bo, proving to the armourer that she's worthy of being with them, it can only help saving a foundling is hugely important. Everything has a relevance, you find, and we continually learn with the Mandalorians. Things that you may think are fairly mundane and fairly irrelevant aren't. Okay, this, you wouldn't say saving a kid is irrelevant, but it's a real honour for a Mandalorian to do such a thing because they give their spare Beskar. It's explained by the armourer how they lift each other up. One generation is always looking out for the next one. It's a very forward-thinking way of living their lives, maybe one you wouldn't consider. And we know now these Mandalorians that we're seeing here who live to a creed and have a way of life that is structured. We would never assume that it was so structured. The armourer notices that Bo is missing a pauldron, so she takes her to the forge. Forge is a new one. It's not the same as the original one that she had with her sort of night owl armour, and asks if she should put the night owl sigil on it. But Bo says no. She sees the mythosaur. We know that she's seen the mythosaur in the living waters. Din doesn't know, but she does tell the armourer that she has seen a mythosaur, and the armourer initially thinks that she means a vision. And she says, no, I actually saw a mythosaur, to which the armourer simply says, this is the way, which is a real sort of answer, non-answer. She makes her the new pauldron. It has the mythosaur on it. It's very much the steel look that Mando has got, which leads me to think that in time, Bo's armour may not end up being a million miles away from what Mando has. As pieces go and pieces change, that, again, we joke, but Hasbro must love this. You know, the armour adjusts and tweaks and changes as time moves on. So we end the episode basically with Bo staring at the skull on the wall. Another fascinating episode. Again, on the face of it, not an awful lot happened. The kid was training. He gets taken by a dragon. They go and rescue the kid from the dragon, and a flashback. And I would say fairly safely that the moment that most people will remember first from The Foundling will be the sequence with Keller and Beck and a younger Grogu. Grogu, who's now a foundling with the Mandalorians. So there's parallels between different characters. We've seen the Skywalker saga, which is a family saga, and ends with Rey as a Skywalker. And the whole concept of found family becomes quite important in that moment in episode 9, which ridiculously is already nearly 4 years ago. You look at The Mandalorian and it's all about found family. And we don't know which way it's going to go with Bo-Katan, but if Bo-Katan does stay with this particular covert, she will presumably answer to the armourer. But we all know that Bo has a destiny that she wants to follow, and that destiny involves the Darksaber. It involves, once again, ruling Mandalore. She's seen Mandalore. She knows it's a place that can be returned to. It's savable. It'll take time, but what doesn't? So there's a plan there. The armourer is very, not evasive, but keeps her cards close to her chest. She's not the most emotive character. She's not a political character in that sense, but she doesn't like to give much away. So I find that intriguing as well. Din would be the reluctant leader if it ever came to him, but he carries the Darksaber. He just hasn't yet chosen to, one, really believe that he owns it. Of all the people we've seen with the Darksaber, he's the worst with it. A guy who can fight, but doesn't believe for whatever reason that thing belongs to him. We've seen Gideon with it, far better with a Darksaber than Din. We've seen Bo-Katan with it, again, far better. There's people who've wielded that saber and wielded it far better than Mando. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And as we think ahead to chapter 21, where is this going to go? Are we going back to Navarro because they kind of seeded certain things in the first episode that maybe Grief Karga's trying to deal with those pirates? Or, as some other people have said, is that going to fold into Skeleton Crew? There's a possibility there. Is Mandalore the target for the future of this season? Mandalore, we know, is battered. It needs rebuilding. Is that somewhere that we're going to return to? Would these Mandalorians want to return to Navarro? You know, the covert that the armourer is with, don't forget, we saw first on Navarro. They were hiding on Navarro in the tunnels and had to leave after Gideon came. So is there a connection to Navarro for them? Would they want to do that? Last week we had Dr. Pershing. There's a whole huge set of questions that we need to follow up on there, because we had Elia Kane come back into it. We haven't seen Gideon yet. The cloning scenario, is it going to tie in with the sequel trilogy as we think it will? Will we see Exegol? Will we see Snoke? There's a lot of questions. People are assuming Thrawn is the big bad. I personally don't think Thrawn's the big bad for Mandalorian. I think he's the big bad for Ahsoka, but not in the sense of controlling the Empire, because the Empire was almost a means to an end. It was more about protecting the Chiss than it was about ruling the Empire. He just happened to be a strategic master who was able to do things with military operations that many others weren't, because he's one of those guys that sees 6 steps ahead. With other big bads that could come into the Mandalorian, Gideon feels like he's the one that needs to be the person that's sort of heading this up, because we are, 6-7 years past Jedi now? You know, the New Republic is well entrenched. We saw a very uncertain New Republic last week doing things that you would not associate normally with any version of a republic, and so that definitely needs more investigating. It had that Andor feel. This week we go back to a more classic Mandalorian style episode. Next week, who knows? We're now past the midway point of the season already. After waiting 3 years for it, we're already on the home straight of the season. Fingers crossed we don't have to wait quite so long, maybe a year or two, because there is plenty of other stuff coming after season 3 of Mando. We've got Acolyte, we've got Ahsoka, we've hopefully got more Bad Batch, we've got Visions, there's other things coming, and Skeleton Crew. But for now, as far as The Mandalorian goes, it's going to be really fascinating to see where this journey takes us, because as it stands, we've really had some fascinating ideas laid out to us. But at the heart of it, as it always has been, it's Grogu and it's Mando, and they're the characters that matter. And we are definitely watching Grogu develop, but also we're watching Mando develop. It became very clear in the early sequences of this episode that Din is dad. We know this, but Bo was like mom. And there's just this little, again, found family group that's developed. Will something further develop with Bo and Din? Is that even something they want? Is it on the cards? Do we want it as an audience? I'm not entirely sure. I like them as they are. They have their own destinies, and it is ultimately a bounty hunter style scenario. It's that kind of Western world. And in classic Westerns, not everybody's trustworthy. People turn on each other. It was going to be very interesting to see where we go.
Thanks for listening to Making Tracks. If you want to be a part of the action and stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, visit fanthatracks.com or check out the free Fanthatracks app through the App Store to follow us on your mobile device. You can reach out to us and send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@fanthatracks.com. Comment, like and share on any of our social media feeds at Fanthatracks, and be sure to subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. And as always, thanks to James Temple for composing the Fanthatracks intro, Adam O'Brien for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. Remember, tune in to Good Morning Tatooine. It's live Sunday evenings at 9 o'clock UK, 4 PM Eastern, 1 PM Pacific on Facebook and YouTube. And check out our Fanthatracks Radio Friday night rotation every Friday night at 7 PM UK time for new episodes of The Phantom from Down Under, Planet Leia, Desert Planet Discs, Start Your Engines, Collecting Tracks, Cannon Fodder, and special episodes of Making Tracks. And that's me done for this episode.
Coming up next on Fanthatracks Radio, it's Collecting Tracks. And remember, Fantha trackers are everywhere.